tie into some of the other themes that we've had.
Yeah, this is awesome.
So here's what I'll jump in first,
Yeah,
and then you can build off it. I loved what she said about ruminating. Whatever you ruminate on grows. So it's this idea that, the more you kind of think about that thing, it's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And so don't ruminate on things either outside of your control or they're going to put you in a frame of mind that's less than productive.
Yeah.
So thinking more about the things you can control. And it ties into some things we heard earlier around self-awareness.
Yeah.
From Ken Keene, but also this idea of, just kind of that ownership, initiative, critical thinking, focusing on, how do I want to show up? How can I be more productive? Those were some of the things that were bouncing around my head when I heard Macy talk.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's funny, there's the psych term, locus of control.
Yeah.
And depending on where your locus of control falls on the spectrum, that can have huge outcomes and impacts on your life. I think this was really interesting too, because she identified like the two buckets that we should all look at daily, like what we can't control, because it's so easy to think that everything is either out of our control. But I think it's also easy to sometimes go the other way and think that everything is in our control.
That's a great point, Abby.
Yeah, I think it's sometimes easy to think like, well, if I XYZ, I can convince person ABC to behave like this. Or if I did XYZ differently, then maybe this would have been different in my life. And those things are easy to ruminate on too.
Yeah, you hit on a couple key points there. One is looking back at things that have already occurred, which again, we can't control that. It's already happened.
Yeah, you're right.
That's
out.
That's going to lead to regret, perhaps, or other kind of forms of kind of cancer to the soul. We don't like that. And then you also hit on there are things sometimes we are delusional about.
Yes.
That we think is within our control.
Yeah.
So. One of the guests we've had on more recently, which would be a regular guest, is a good friend of mine. He's retired, Len Laritz. And I sat down with Len in his house some years ago after he had retired, and we were talking about some things. And I came back the next day, and he said to me, you're delusional. That's what he said. And his point was, he said, you think you can control certain people's feelings based on what you do.
Yeah.
And I think that's a common trap that I think a lot of us fall into, that we think either, people have control over our feelings. They did this thing and made me feel this way. Or I can do this thing and make them feel something. We can have no control over someone's feelings.
Yeah.
Now they can,
it was really interesting. I had to take a test about locus of control. I scored extremely high that I have an internal locus of control, like the top percentile. Like I think pretty much everything is in my control, and if I do certain things, like I can change, and that's not true.
Is that the stage of is that delusional? When you get
delusional.
To
that's what it is.
Okay.
It's delusional.
Well, you come by it honestly.
I do.
I think that's the
what
phrase.
I'm hearing.
I think that's the phrase.
But I think it goes both ways, and I think kind of getting yourself in the middle and kind of grounded in a very balanced way when it comes to things in your control and outside of your control. I think that is really important.